Hello and welcome back to COMM-6019 46. And now in week 2, we're going to take a look at particular writing styles when it comes to business letters, business emails, memos, and so on. People still write those. But really all of them are under the umbrella of business correspondences. Those correspondences and those messages need to meet the needs of the person that is receiving the message, as well as the person that is dictating or composing the message. What is it that you wish that person to think about, to consider, to do? And there are ways to go about doing that. And that's what I want to look at. So first here, we're going to click on our things. Okay. The first thing we need to remember is that these letters and emails and memos need to be formatted in a particular way. And the way in which we do it is the following here. Now, I know this is not the easiest thing to read. You can probably just Google business letter template and you'll find the same information. But as you can see here at the very top, we have very relevant information. We have the address. Above that is the date, the particular date that this thing is written. So we have the date. Also, too, at the very, very top, you need to have the sender's information. So let's go top to bottom here. I've probably confused you already. Very top, we have to have the sender's information. Now, whether that is a phone and fax number or an address, email or whatever, put that at the very top. You double space, put in the date, double space again, and then you put in the sender's address. Where is this going to? Double space again, and then you have a salutation. So dear, hello, hi, depending on how familiar you are with the person. That has a lot to do with exactly what the tone of the salutation will be. Always, regardless of memo, business letter, email, it has to have a subject line. And here, a subject line, surprise, is formatting a business letter. So you need to have your address, the date, the sender's address, salutation, dear Ms. Williams in this case, and a subject line. So regardless of the format in terms of what it is, or I guess the vehicle, whether it's a letter, memo, or an email, have the subject line. And then from there it starts. And as you can see here, we're going to move my little arrow here all the way down. Everything is left justified. The right is not justified. It's kind of ragged. But everything is left justified. And the paragraphs are single space. So single spaced paragraphs with double space between. This is the format in which we write a business letter, any kind of business message. Then at the very top, sincerely, regards, which is a formal way to close a letter or email. If I know you really well, typically I'll just write cheers, comma, and then my name. It really depends. It depends on what? It depends on how well you know the person that you are writing to. If you're writing to a friend within the department or the next department that works with you, and you know them by first name, you deal with them all the time, cheers is fine. But something is nice. Now, sincerely regards is more formal than cheers, obviously. So really, it's up to you to decide how well you know that person to be able to write in that particular way. Then, of course, underneath, if it's a letter, you may have to print it and sign it and then send it off. Or if it's not, you simply write sincerely and then you put your name directly below it. If you have a title, executive director in this case, you want to put that information in there as well. So really from top to bottom, it's pretty straightforward. You have your address, date, the sender's address, a salutation, dear, hello or hi, subject line, always, then single-spaced paragraphs, double-spaced between them. If you have a list, you can indent that list in order to set it off from the rest of the paragraphs, but single space within the paragraph. Then at the end, sincerely or regards, if it's formal, cheers, thanks, comma, if it's informal, followed by your name. And that's really about it. That's essentially what it looks like. Again, an email, it'll be the same thing. Current date, the to and from, right? Who is it going to? And who is it coming from? And then again, the ever popular subject line, formatting stationery for memos, emails. And really after that, it's the same thing, right? So, and then of course, most emails are already structured so that when you start to fill one out, the date, to, from, subject line, all those things are already there. The date are usually dates, should say, usually generated by the email itself. But if you were to actually map one out, you would put the date in there. But certainly to, from, and subject line are already built in. You might need to CC someone, which means you're going to have, what does CC stand for? That's old school stuff. It used to mean carbon copy. In other words, carbon copy, a copy of this letter to the following people. That's where that kind of comes from. So the format was kept, CC'd people. So let's say you have to correspond with 3 people each time. Then certainly you CC the same individuals each time, but remember what you're writing, because you wish to be able to contact these other 2 individuals. You don't want to start kind of spilling the beans and, spreading gossip about someone. It's just wrong. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Because even if it isn't CC'd, someone else could see it. That could be sitting on someone's screen and someone happens to just walk by and they just catch their name. They look like, wow, that's pretty harsh. So just don't do those kinds of things. Spreading gossip is not something you want to do in the work environment. Now, let's kind of get back on track here. So the formatting, as you can see, is left justified. Everything follows through. Date, to, from, subject, and then again, single spaced, double spaced between the paragraphs. Here it says thank you rather than cheers or regards, probably because Heidi knows this person Rob, fairly well, and then just signs it. So everything's fine. Memos, I think, are still being done, but I think they're kind of going the way of the fax machines. People aren't doing them as often, simply because you can send an email. It's just a lot easier. But as you can see, the format is the same. Everything is aligned, date, to, from, CC if someone needs to be in on that email, and the subject line. So what is consistent? To and from, always a subject line, even in the business letter. And then left justified all the way through, single paragraph or single space in the paragraph, double space between the paragraphs. Okay, so I keep harping on the subject line, and that is important. For example, this morning I received an email from a student that had written kind of a generic email for probably 4 or 5 instructors that she needed to contact. The problem was she wrote the course code for a course that I don't teach. So when I looked at it, I thought, okay, for some reason I ended up on a mailing list that this student is using. So I contacted her and I said, I'm sorry I can't help you because I don't teach this course. So please have a look on FOL to see who the instructor is. So she apologized, which was exactly the right thing to do. Everyone was very cordial and said, no, I'm sorry, I was really tired. I am a student of yours in another class. Oh, so I took her name and I said, okay, and looked it up and all right, here we are. So this is a student of mine in a different course. So what threw me off was the subject line, and in fact, not only the subject line, which had the course code of a course that I don't teach, but also had it showing winter of 21. Well, we finished winter of 21. We're now in spring, summer of 21. So those 2 things threw me off. So I apologize, even though it was not technically my mistake, but I did not pursue it any further until the student said, well, sir, I am a student of yours in your philosophy class. Okay. No problem. So yes, there I can at least apologize and say, I'm very sorry. I misunderstood. It was the subject line that threw me off. Okay. So what am I getting at here? The subject line is important. Now, in this case, this student was very stressed and had to contact several people very quickly because of the nature of the situation and just made a very simple mistake. It threw me off at first. I responded to it rather than ignoring it, which is just not very polite. And once the student was able to clarify who she was, no problem. And off we went. So we dealt with the problem. So when you are looking at writing a subject line, write it so that it will be useful in terms of identifying who you are, or if that's not necessary, identifying the nature of the email. What is it about? Can you reduce the contents of the email to one phrase? That's your subject line, and that's what you want to put in there. So what does that subject line do? It kind of gives the message a framework, or at least a reference, or a keyword even, that when I see it, I'm going to say, oh, it's about this. So the email, email, business letter, or memo should have a subject line that is specific and concise, relevant to the message. And it also kind of, if the message is good news, certainly say, hey, great news regarding something. Fantastic. Now, where it gets a bit more tricky is in a negative message or an indirect message. There, you don't necessarily want to place the exact nature of the message there, because you don't want to throw off the person who may read the subject line first and be disappointed by the message, because there is a way to convey bad news in a positive way. And this is something we'll talk about in more detail next week when you start your first assignment. But the message in the subject line should fit the message in the body paragraphs. If it is negative, really backpedal the negativity of the message. Leave it in the body paragraphs, and I'll show you how to do that properly. Persuasive messages, of course, they're also very important. You want to highlight good news. If the message is brief, absolutely, the good news is always worth knowing. So really it depends on the nature of the message and what you want it to convey to that other person. So letters typically are sent to people outside the organization. If you're writing to someone within the organization, memos and emails are perfectly fine. But let's face it, I'm going to have a book published hopefully in a couple of months. All the hard work is done. I'm just waiting to hear back from my publisher. But I didn't send them a letter. I sent them an email. So the letters to people outside the organization is not always consistent. Generally speaking, it can be done that way. What I like to stress is the fact that letters should be written when something is really important. If this is a document that could be considered even a legal document, let's say it has to do with a warranty, or let's say it has to do with a judgment or a ruling on something, on some particular event, and you want to be able to file away a letter, you make a copy of it for yourself, for your own records, and you send the other to the person that you are, you're communicating with. So you want to have a copy of it, and the more important the more important the message is, the more likely you will be to use a letter. If it is private and confidential, absolutely use a letter, because you wish that letter to be read by only one other person, which is the person that is the receiver of the letter. So kind of a rule of thumb, again, I don't want to confuse everyone, but if the message is really, really important, or it is private and confidential, use a letter. If it is just communicating in a kind of very general sense, memos and emails are perfectly fine. Okay, so messages are being sent to people both inside and outside the organization. They can be both formal or informal. They can be direct or indirect. So there is some leeway, right? There's some latitude. You can ask yourself, is the message within it, should it be public and permanent? Is it something that you wish to convey to the general public about a particular stand that you're taking towards an issue? Regardless, again, as you write more of these, you'll begin to understand pretty quickly what is required of you, right? This is a serious message that wish people, that will pay attention to it, because you don't want to get it, drowning in a sea of other emails. Maybe a letter would be good. Lawyers tend to contact you via letters, right? Rather than emails, because lawyers deal with legal matters. They deal with lawsuits, right? They deal with issues regarding warranties, or guarantees that, that a company will offer to someone that they fall through with. So any communications with a lawyer, they're important, right? So they're always done with letters. Now, once you contact a lawyer, you certainly will, convey information back and forth via email, but that might be yourself as a client and the lawyer. But once a lawyer sends information out on your behalf to another party, always that is done in the form of a letter. And those letters should have proper etiquette, not hey you, but dear. It doesn't end with yo, or it doesn't end with, thanks THX or something like that. No. Proper etiquette, proper grammar is important. Language and tone is important, and we'll talk about that in more detail. Again, this is something you don't want to look at, which is, professor misspelt. I think we went through these last week. Unable to attend class. Did we do anything? Well, of course we did. Thanks, student name, right? It's kind of, wow, that's pretty harsh. Subject. Okay, this one at least has a subject line, COMM-6019, but I have no idea what it's about. I just know it's from a student who's taking my comm course. Yo pro. Ooh, okay. Yo professional. I don't know. Sorry, missed the assignment. When do I get to write it? Really? Okay, rather presumptuous. Later, as we're walking out the door, giving me a high five. Tone is incorrect. Okay, now the subject line gets a little bit longer. COMM-6019 missed assignment. Okay, all right, dear Ed. All right, that's getting better, right? At least they're addressing me by my first name. My second name, dear Mr. Matthews or Professor Matthews, would be ideal. But hey, let's not quibble. My name is whatever. Hope you remember, as I've not been to class very much, my fault. Need to pass a course. Really? And there's only 2 weeks left. Warmest regards, right? It's like, okay, is that sarcastic? Are you being sort of satirical here? Like, there's so many things wrong with it. But what is wrong with, right with it is the subject matter, the subject line. Subject line 6019 missed assignment. Fantastic. Warmest regards. Given the tone of the email and what it's asking, it is a little bit sarcastic. But, thank you. Regards might be a little bit better, but warmest regards kind of is bordering on like, yeah, whatever, little elbow jab. Okay. Subject, hi. Not good. Teacher, also not good. Totally missed class, freaking out, by the way. No, everything is wrong with that email. From the tone, from the sort of very dismissive attitude by the student that was written it. Doesn't even have my name, doesn't even have the course code, and then thanks, TNX, right? And a smiley face. That's not a business correspondence. Not very good at all. So what you want to do is not think about an email disaster necessarily that you have done, but certainly you can Google email disasters and just have some fun for a couple of minutes. There's lots and lots of really, really bad ones. Okay, so that's the end of this first set of slides and video. We'll be back in just a moment with the second half, and I'll see you very shortly.